Onassis Foundation.
Dublab.
Welcome to the Quarantine Tapes, a daily podcast from Onassis LA and Dublab. Hosted by Paul Holdengräber, this series chronicles shifting paradigms in the era of social distancing.
Hello, Paul.
Hello, Naomi Shihab Nye. What a pleasure to have you on this call. Thank you so much for being part of the Quarantine Tapes. How are you today?
You're so very kind. I've been looking forward to hearing your melodious voice, and I'm doing well today. Thank you, Paul.
Well, thank you.
How are you?
I am all right. I've been busy with these quarantine tapes for the last 3 or 4 months, speaking to people, trying to chronicle this moment for what it's worth, trying to take their temperature, trying to figure out what's happening. And I feel that I don't know what's happening. I only know various stories. I only know that certain people live it in a certain way, and I'm curious how you have been living these last 3 or 4 months. You wrote to me that there is a certain sustenance of simplicity and ritual, and I'm wondering, what are your rituals these days now?
Yes. Well, I have felt very drawn to expressing them, the simplest things, the simplest movements that help you feel as if you're rooted, as if time is still your friend, as if we're still having some kind of gravity and context. So I've been very simple about, I've always been a morning writer, so that has been helpful. Coming to my desk every morning, 1 cup of coffee, just starting the day that way and feeling, that didn't change. That's always been there for me. But the rest of the day, not going out as much and not seeing other people, hardly at all, except for my own family, been a curious difference. And I think it makes you kind of within your little home space find just kind of a new north, new south. But I always had a conviction since I was a teenager, Paul, that simplicity had within it the kind of essential key that we needed to stay sane. I was sort of a Henry David Thoreau fanatic as a teenager, and thinking about how little we need to sustain, to survive, thinking about how much we need our attention placed on elements that are meaningful to us and beautiful to us, figuring out how to balance the rush of news every day has been an interesting challenge or puzzle. Basically things that we think about all the time, even in regular life, but how do we coordinate kind of our energies and ourselves when we're more in place?
I love the fact that you've been using the word as if there was gravity, as if.
Yes.
Sort of, and it made me think also of your reference to simplicity and how complicated simplicity is to get.
And it is because we're so good at cluttering things. And I think allowing our minds to be cluttered and allowing our kitchen counters to be cluttered, I've found a new obsession in wanting everything really polished off, cleaned up every night before I go to bed, perfectly. Have everything empty again and open and waiting. But it's very easy to be cluttered. That's certainly true. So it's not so easy to have the clarification, the selection process, So it's been terribly interesting, Paul. It really has been.
Well, I spoke with a philosopher early on these quarantine tapes, Simon Critchley, who said that this moment is a very philosophical moment.
That's beautiful, yes. And it's a very poetic moment, too. I followed many of the beautiful projects presented by the New York Times, for example, how artists are interpreting the moment, or what artists see looking out of their windows, or the emptiness in great public spaces. And all of these felt very poetic and very philosophic at the same time.
It's incredible. Today I was reading of a concert that is happening, or that happened in Barcelona, at the biggest, it may be the opera hall, and it's the musicians are playing to 2,243 plants. They put plants. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Oh, really?
Yes, and they bow to the plants.
That is incredible.
They bow to the flowers. Something else that struck me is your use of the word attention. And every time I hear the word attention, I always remember Simone Weil, who said that attention is a form of prayer, which brings me immediately to a quotation I think you love by Flaubert, who said, "To find something interesting, you merely have to look at it long enough." And I'm wondering how that resonates for you at this moment.
Well, my goodness, there's a very dead branch hanging out of an ancient tree outside my study window where I sit every day. And the tree is more than 100 years old and quite towering over our yard. And I keep hoping that, I'll remember someday to have the branch cut off, but I've become very aware that it is the branch that offers me the greatest bird views, because all the birds land on this one branch, this dangling branch that has no leaves, and they're right in front of my window, and I wouldn't see them. And, just so many little curiosities that become evident to us when we're spending more time in one place. And I do think poetry has always been about that too. I mean, poetry was the deep, contemplative, long, loving gaze at something or into something. I remember talking to kids over the years so much about how poems try to look into things, not just at them. And surely we've all had plenty of that time of looking into. I was doing a class with some, it was like just a workshop hour with some students in a small town in East Texas a few weeks ago. And it was a town I had visited in January. And I had really loved the students there. And so they have a summer writing camp, but this year, of course, it's virtual. And just seeing them, some of them I had met before, but some I hadn't met, seeing them in their rooms and talking to them about what was on their walls and what they saw when they looked out their windows. And they ended up, our whole session after they shared the poems they had written, some of them ended up by talking about their new obsessive hobbies. And their hobbies were quite interesting. I was really impressed. And I thought, well, these are teenagers. It must be harder for them than it is for an older person to be at home this long without your friends. But they had done such good things, thinking of, what did they have near at hand? What could they start creating that would feel engaging and beautiful? And, not one of them didn't have an answer either. Every single one of them had something
It's so interesting to me when you say what is on their walls. I was reading, as I was preparing to talk to you, Naomi, I was reading that you go around the world, as it were, now as a young people's poet laureate, but I think just your general disposition is to go around the world with to evangelize the world with poetry, as it were, if one could say. And you write on walls of places where you encounter young people. You write this sentence: "You are living in a poem." And
yes, I
love that,
that,
and I love that, and I love that, and I'd love for you to tell me what that might mean for you at this present moment.
Well, I think sometimes it's good to be reminded of advice we've given others. You know, one thing I have felt during this pandemic period is that I don't have a lot of advice. You know, I don't know what's coming around the bend.
Nobody does. Nobody does.
Yeah, nobody does. We're in this state of unknowing. But you think back, okay, it's right here. I'm looking around. I'm pulling open this drawer. I'm pulling this box off the shelf. I haven't opened it in years. What's inside? And invariably, you will find many astonishing possibilities in that box or in that new space that you're staring at. There will be surprises. You'll have kind of a better idea. You'll want to run and send something to someone. You'll have a new connection between elements, which is one thing that I really believe poetry is. It's taking elements that already exist, reconnecting them or newly connecting them. So there's been no dearth of that. I mean, we've all been probably doing it in our spaces unconsciously all this time.
In a way, you're describing metaphor.
Yes.
Metaphor, which is, as you've said somewhere, you said it's a great tool of thought.
Yes, and for a kind of refreshment of spirit. What felt like happiness to us a year ago is I think we have a different feeling of happiness now. I was talking to a friend through email this morning, and at this very moment, she's waiting for the test results to return.
Right.
About 5 people in her family. And she said, I've never had such a glow around negative in my mind. I want those tests to be negative. And I thought that's funny because right now negative has become a happier word than it ever was.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so even simple relationships.
Simple words
yes.
that have been transformed through this moment. I want to take you back a little bit, Naomi, and take you back and take us back by taking you back to where you grew up. You grew up in a tiny house full, as you say, of large music. Can you evoke for us some of the things you heard? And what kinds of music are you listening to now? And my last question connected to all of that, for our listeners, is there any Arabic music you would recommend to us?
Oh, yes.
Oh, all
sure.
of that, all of that.
Yeah, all of that. I like all of that. Well, I don't want to forget my Arabic musicians, so I'll have to say that over the past month, I've been quite obsessed with the music of Hamza Namira, Namira. And I'm particularly fond of Dadi Albi. Anyway, people, if you look up Hamza Namira, he is quite an unusual originally Egyptian musician who is playing and singing so exquisitely. So I'm pretty obsessed with him. But I also listen to a lot of older Arabic music, old Palestinian compilations that I've had for years. But the house I grew up in, originally my first home was Ferguson, Missouri, a place that people had barely heard of on the other side of St. Louis. It was a borough of St. Louis. I grew up in the days of segregation, where there was this indeterminate line between the black and white community of Ferguson. And my Palestinian father was disturbed by that and talked about it openly. And my mother, who was an American, was very attracted. At the same time, the large music was people like Marian Anderson, and Mahalia Jackson and Paul Robeson. So all great Black singers. And to live in the time of segregation with the Black community like separated about 3 blocks over from where our little house was, and have this music playing full volume, it was rather mysterious to me. Like, wait a minute, these are the voices we love that we listen to every night in our home. Why can't I go to school with those kids? I took a job as a 11-year-old picking berries on a farm, an organic farm, which is still a place that's part of my life, called Earth Dance in Ferguson. One of my intentions was so I could meet Black kids and so I could work with them. And we picked berries together and got to know one another. And I was mystified by acceptance. What was that? Why immigrants of a certain kinds be accepted, and yet these kids, we were not in the same school. So, of course, all that would change. And Ferguson, just during the pandemic, I think a month ago, has elected its first Black mayor, which I was cheering for, a woman, and the first woman as well. And it's a community I've continued to go back to and love very much. And of course, I'm so happy that it's so integrated now. However, the growing up there would kind of mark me when Ferguson became this place of enormous sorrow 6 years ago when Michael Brown was killed so unnecessarily. And it would just be part of that whole necklace of American injustices that we've been seeing take place before our eyes. No one could ever have imagined, I think at that time, that Ferguson would be such a hot spot, and even the name of it would be known by everyone from coast to coast. But then we went from there to Jerusalem, where my father was from, and being a Palestinian who had lost his home in 1948 and living near to yet another no man's land, as they called it in those days, between Palestine and Israel, or the greater Jordan time and Israel. It was also mystifying because it wasn't the place he had grown up and known, and there was this sense of division and occupation and struggle and chaos, and it was closer to the surface there at that point. And of course now that continues on as an unresolved situation, and many dramatic things are continuing to happen there. And many Palestinian friends of mine this very week have been talking about the beautiful ancient villages of their families being, suddenly taken over by soldiers, gunpoint once again. Same sorrows, continuing. And then my family moved to a completely different place, South Texas. I live in a 63% Latino city and love it here very much, and am very aligned with the issues of the Latinx community here and the anti-wall sentiment and the clarity that this really is Mexico where we are. So how dare anyone be cruel to the beautiful Mexican people whose home this is? So it's as if every...
what strikes me so much is that poetry is for you a tool of thought, but it seems also in your bones, Naomi, to be a tool for action. And if you permit me, I will read to you. It's a little bit of chutzpah to do this, but I will read to you the poem I discovered you through, and since then your work has mattered to me greatly. You've heard it 100 times, read by yourself and by others. It's called Red Brocade, and it goes like this. The Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him for 3 days before asking who he is, where he's from, where he's headed. That way, he'll have strength enough to answer. Or, by then, you'll be such good friends, you don't care. Let's go back to that. Rice, pine nuts. Here, take the red brocade pillow. My child will serve water to your horse. I love that poem for so many reasons. Of course, the language first and foremost, but also the sentiment, how much harder it is to not care about people when you know them.
Yeah. Yes. And how the situation of separation has so many forms, doesn't it, throughout our world, this sense disconnect. And I do think that poetry is a way that we try to connect further somehow. If not with, the other, quote, side, whatever that side will be, with our own selves, with our own thinking, with other meaning, trying to make connection. I do think that's one of the many, many tasks of poetry.
A student once said to you, poetry is eating all my problems.
Yes.
What do you think she meant?
Well, I remember that student vividly. It was a time when I think the students had been writing about family, and she felt that she had a lot of anxieties within her family, or I think a grandparent she loved very much may have just died not long before. And she felt that through writing, she was recalibrating her own psyche and kind of identifying who she was in the midst of those many personal problems in her home. Certainly I saw that manifest so many times over the years with students who would write about difficult materials and hard memories and find, well, even though that was hard to live through, there's something to say now about it that's worthy, or from it, or I know something from that. And I think there was a great joyous discovery in that for so many kids, and always will be with poetry, that even writing about hard things can actually be pleasurable and you realize something new.
Well, what is remarkable, I have always found in thinking about you and reading your poetry, is the world is bleak, the world is dark, but yet we need to sing. And we need to laugh, and we need to take joy. And it reminded me of the wonderful line of Montaigne, where he said that the surest sign of wisdom is constant cheerfulness.
Nice.
We don't love because, but we love in spite, and we tried in some way to overcome these moments that are just so dark.
Yes. Well, you did ask me about music and what I'm listening to now. And right now I want to catch up on, there are a lot of new albums, the new Bob Dylan, the new Fiona Apple that I want to listen to. But also I've been listening to Miles Davis live at the Plugged Nickel over and over and over again. I think, okay, I have to listen to that. I have to find that. Or, listening to our old beloved favorites. My husband and I have been Tom Waits fanatics for more than 40 years.
Me too. He's the one person I really, really would love to talk to soon. I always remember that wonderful profile that Elizabeth Gilbert did in Gentleman's Quarterly in GQ, where she took a ride with Tom Waits in Los Angeles and said to him, "But Tom, what happened between these two albums? They're 7 years." And he said, "I got stuck in a traffic jam."
I forgot that. That's terrific.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Well, he's just, we need his voice right now. We need his voice always. But yeah, so listening to old favorites, and I think music has taken on a big place in so many lives too, because that's another ritualistic part of the day. To do a chore, to cook a dinner, you pick the music you'll listen to, and it's great pleasure there.
And reading and
yes.
and reading other poets, and you and I share, I think, a deep love for William Merwin. And,
very deep.
In closing, I would so love you to perhaps choose perhaps a poem by Merwin that you particularly are fond of. I mean, for me there are so many, and
there's so many. I mean, really, I feel with William Merwin, you could open any of his books anywhere and read and be so filled with sustenance. But I feel today like reading to the book, because so many of us have had new encounters with books that were already in our homes that maybe we hadn't spent as much time as we dreamed of yet. And so this is for all the authors in the world, the writers sending out their books, and it's also a sense of missing William, but still having his books. To the Book by W.S. Merwin. Go on then, in your own time. This is as far as I will take you. I am leaving your words with you, as though they had been yours all the time. Of course you are not finished. How can you be finished? When the morning begins again, or the moon rises, even the words are not finished, though they may claim to be. Never mind. I will not be listening when they say how you should be different in some way. You will be able to tell them that the fault was all mine. Whoever I was, I made you up. Isn't it terrific?
It's tremendous. And, William, who we both knew fairly, I mean, in your case, I think very well, in my case, fairly well, is with me. And I remember that wonderful sentence of yours is in Voices in the Air, where you say, people do not pass away, they die, and then they stay.
Yes.
And he's right there. He's right there.
He's right there.
He's right there. He's contemplating the way we live our lives now. I really wonder what he would say about this moment.
I do too, because he really loved solitude and staying at home and not going anywhere. That was his favorite activity, and working in his garden. So, many people have told me their gardens are improved since the pandemic because they've had more time to spend with them and, weed and feed and do everything they could with their gardens. So I think William in some ways is nodding every time we do that. I feel him very close.
Yeah, and he said on the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree, and when one thinks about that at this moment, as sometimes things seem to be going in that direction, a tree seems to be something that might sustain us. Naomi, might I ask you to, in closing, leave us with a poem of yours?
Yes, I would love to. And Paul, thank you for your most generous questions, your beautiful thinking and guidance. I really appreciate the privilege of talking with you. So this is a simple poem called One, and it starts and ends with quotes from our grandson, who has been quite a bright light for us during this period. A delivery man pounded the door. The boy said, that shook my bones. Only months ago, before this happened, on the brink, at the edge, I kept saying, something really big and weird is about to happen. No one responded or would say, isn't this weird enough already? At his father's funeral in Libya, everyone told Khalid, I Zina Wahad. Our grief is one. Under the differences, beyond the many years we did not speak together, Wahad, one. When the sun sinks low, we will both be watching it, perplexed. I told the boy I had a bad dream. He said, have a new one.
When did you write this?
Oh, that was a few weeks ago, a month ago, maybe.
So during this time?
Yes. Oh, during this time, yes. And his notes, his voice has been so clear in my ear during this period. I have definitely taken a lot of notes of his wisdom.
Naomi, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Paul.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Stay safe.
Thank you. And I send you good wishes for the rest of quarantining.
Me too. And let us see each other when this moment too shall pass.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
To support this show and Dublab's progressive programming, go to dublab.com/support.